Welcome, and thank you for attending today's Healthcare IT News webinar, UnPAC and Build Your Own VNA-based Enterprise Imaging Strategy, sponsored by Mach7 Technologies. VNA platform deployments are outpacing PACS by 5 times. During this webinar, attendees will learn why Sentara Healthcare and Wake Radiology chose to design their enterprise image management strategies on a VNA base. Our speakers today will be Mary Lou Lovell, Senior Clinical Systems Analyst at Wake Radiology, and Brian Appleby, Clinical Systems Manager at Wake Radiology. We'll also hear from Trent, Conway, Director of IT at Sentara Healthcare, and finally, Eric Rice, CTO at Mach7 Technologies. With that, I'd like to hand it off to Trent to begin our presentation. Trent?
Yes, hello, thanks. My name is Trent Conway, and like she said, I'm the Director of IT at Sentara Healthcare. Sentara Healthcare is a not-for-profit healthcare system in Virginia and Northeast Carolina. We're currently headquartered in Norfolk, Virginia, constituting 12 acute care hospitals and over 100 physician practices. Across our enterprise of 12 hospitals and physician practices, we are using the Epic EMR. That's important through our integration process with our VNA solution. Through acquisitions and just normal growth over the years, we've become an organization that now owns 8 disparate PACS systems, and those systems are spanning 7 different vendors. So as you can imagine, it's a bit of a challenge, coordinating the efforts of all of those PACS systems. What I'm going to go through today is a little bit of the journey that we've taken to get to the implementation portion of this project. As I do presentations and talk to other customers around and clients around the country, it seems to be one of the most difficult components of getting to the starting line. And by that I mean, how do you get there? What do you need to be concerned with? What types of things do you need to consider? And quite honestly, where can you get help to get those particular things that you're going to need? So I'll start with this next slide. And by show of hands, how many people here have a good definition of vendor-neutral archive? That actually works a lot better when I'm doing this presentation in front of a live audience. Anyway, that being said, there's nothing neutral about a vendor-neutral archive. In fact, if you take a look at the definition of neutral, the definition says not aligned or supporting either side of a position. Quite honestly, that's the last thing that I want for my vendor, is to be neutral. I want them to be exactly aligned with my position and what my ultimate roadmap is. One of the first things that we realized here at Sentara as we were going through the process of vendor selection was the fact that we were trying to treat this as a typical application procurement, when the reality of it is it has really nothing to do with something as simple as just selecting an application. It truly is a journey, it's a strategy, and it's a roadmap that you want to employ in your organization. So when we sat back and we thought through that, we found right off the bat that it was going to be extraordinarily important for us to build a relationship with the appropriate vendors in order to go through that journey and realize the successes on the roadmap that we had defined. So when I talk about relationship, I'm talking about the connection between the client and the vendor. The importance of this relationship, I think a lot of times gets overlooked in the vendor selection process. But for us here at Sentara, it was critical to select a vendor that was both nimble and agile, and a vendor whose design roadmap aligned with what we had already put together. But most importantly, I think from the vendor perspective and the relationship perspective, it was important that we put communication above all else at all levels of both organizations, and we needed to make that a top priority. So as we went through the process and started evaluating vendors, that was a key component of that process. The second thing that we decided we needed was a very clear and concise list of goals that we wanted to achieve down this roadmap through this journey. During that conversation, what we realized was that most of our goals all came back to one centralized issue, and that was before we could get any further down the road, we needed to solve current issues that were sitting in front of us today. And each and every one of the issues could almost always be boiled back to the fact that our response time for image retrieval and access was lacking. We spent more time dealing with those types of issues than we should be. So as we looked at the vendor solutions, the first thing that we had to solve and the first thing the vendor had to help us solve were the response time issues that we were dealing with. Beyond that, once we moved past the upfront issues that we were dealing with, the second particular issue that we wanted to deal with was storage costs. In order to get a project like this approved through our organization, we had to show some sort of cost savings. And most organizations are probably dealing with, soaring storage costs. I call it the out of sight, out of mind phenomena. In the age of digital imaging, no one wants to destroy images any longer. There's no floor space to recover anymore. There's no silver to recover. So exactly how are you going to manage your images in order to save storage costs? And through the VNA solution, and specifically image lifecycle management, we were able to realize very significant storage costs. Additionally, and this is kind of significant for our organization, I mentioned earlier that we have 8 different PACS systems spanning 7 different vendors. We needed to become PACS agnostic. And by that, I guess what I mean is that we needed to make ourselves nimble from a PACS vendor perspective. To me, this is the foundation of the UnPAC strategy. By becoming PACS agnostic, it gives us options as to the path our organization can take in order to realize the benefits of the UnPAC strategy. Depending on which PACS systems we ultimately consolidate, maybe we eliminate, but at the end of the day, by becoming PACS agnostic via VNA technology and unified viewer technology, we have that ability, and it gives us options as we move down the road. The last two really somewhat similar. We needed to come up with a centralized or a standardized acquisition strategy and business continuity model. Two of the things that we've struggled with, again, 8 PACS systems, as you can imagine, prove the point that we have not done a good job here at Centera in our acquisition strategy as it relates to PACS systems. And as a byproduct of that, our business continuity models for those PACS systems has been quite a challenge. I'm going to go ahead and throw a polling question up here, and I'm going to talk you through this as you take a look at it, and feel free to go ahead and start to fill this out. One of the things that we did here early on was we decided that we needed help. We did not know enough to make an informed decision. So we went out and we partnered with a consulting group, Ascendian Healthcare Consulting, who has a significant expertise in the imaging market and understands the vendors and the technologies. The reason that we partnered with them was, again, because we didn't feel like we knew enough to go it alone. So as I looked back and I was putting these slides together, I thought it might be interesting to find out from other organizations out there what type or how much time and effort you guys are putting into the different areas in order to prepare yourself for the VNA roadmap and journey that you're going to take. So the first line item is around imaging technologies, and specifically what I mean by that is, do you feel that you know enough about the technologies between vendors to be able to compare and contrast them? And that's a very, very difficult situation to get yourself into, or out of, I should say, because of the fact that there are different flavors of VNAs. Every PACS vendor has their own flavor of a VNA, or they partnered with somebody. So how can you get into the level of detail that's necessary to really truly understand what it is you're ultimately going to be purchasing, what vendor you're going to be building a relationship with, and how far down your roadmap you'll be able to go with this particular vendor. And of course that ties into the vendor landscape. How much do you know about the different vendors? The landscape has changed extraordinarily over the last 3 to 4 years. Whether you're going to RSNA or HIMSS or any of the major conferences, you see that landscape changing. You see partnerships developing. You see some vendors falling off. You see some rising to the top. But how much do you truly know about the individual vendors and where they're going and what their roadmap looks like? With those two things, then you get into what I consider to be the execution phase of the vendor selection process and grading up the RFP. The RFP obviously is going to be probably the single most valuable tool that you'll be able to create in order to evaluate the vendors. And so, who can give you the expertise, or do you have the expertise to be able to build that RFP in order to ultimately differentiate the vendors? Creating the business case, for us, that was very, very important here at Centera. It's a situation where you need to decide and determine internally what leverage points you need to attack. Your ROI on this project may not be enough. In fact, it may not even exist. The majority of the ROI is going to come through, more than likely, storage cost reduction as a result of ILM. But where are you going to go when it comes to that? Are you going to be able to go through and find clinical leverage? Are you going to be able to find legal leverage, corporate level leverage, and so forth? And then at the end, and this is probably the most important, but you really can't get to this last strategy component, but how does your roadmap align with the vendors that you're pursuing? And that's obviously very important, because at some point you're going to get past that initial hurdle and you're going to have your quote-unquote VNA up and running. But where are you going to go from there internally? Are you looking to stay within the radiology department? Do you want to go outside of the radiology department and start to tackle all of your other ologies? And what exactly does that mean? Will you decide to eliminate or consolidate PACS systems? And exactly what does that mean? And again, the UnPAC strategy from Mach7 is exactly in line with what we're looking to do here at Centera. So it looks like we've got a reasonable number of responses. So I'll go ahead and pull those up, and hopefully you can see those right now. Pretty interesting. And I've done this survey before, and I would say that it is almost identical to what I've seen as far as the percentages. And generally what we see is the education of the technology is always the leading candidate. That's where we spend the majority of our time. A lot of us come from an IT background, and that's obviously the thing that we're going to put the most emphasis on. Vendor landscape usually does lag to some degree. Part of that is because, again, I think we're in IT, and we expect that we can understand technologies, and that will give us a true picture of the vendor that we're dealing with. I will argue that point, however, and suggest that it's very, very important to understand what type of relationship you will ultimately have with that vendor. Always, and every time I talk to different customers about this, creation of the comprehensive RFP, it is always the lowest scored piece to the puzzle, because it's the most difficult to get down to the granular level that you need to in order to evaluate a vendor from top to bottom. Very, very difficult, very difficult. And of course your business case. Depending on your organization, this can vary. Some organizations, this is a top-down project, so your business case is somewhat already been bought into. Others, it's a ground-up process, as it was with us, and it's something that you have to build your business case and your leverage points and sell all the way up through your organization. So this one, I've seen it go higher, I've seen it go lower. And the strategy and roadmap, a lot of us are really starting to think about that, and that's really the purpose of this particular webinar today, is how well do your objectives and your roadmap align with what Mach7 is doing with the UnPAC strategy and what we're doing here at Centera along with Mach7 for that UnPAC strategy. So to kind of sum up this, the things that I would recommend is that it's important to seek help, especially in some of those areas where the scores aren't quite so high, because those will be critical. I've spoken with Eric and his team at Mach7 multiple times and explained to them that the most valuable customer that they can ever go in front of is the highly educated customer. And the reason I say that is because the product that they have to offer takes advantage of the highly educated customer. So the more you want to push the envelope as an organization, the better you're going to be with a vendor like Mach7, because that's exactly where they want you to go. All right. I'm going to sum up before I turn it over to Mary Lou. I get asked this question almost every single time I do any type of presentation or have a conversation. What was the biggest hurdle that you had to deal with going through the entire process of the vendor selection and all the way through implementation? And the answer to that question is getting to the starting line. And what I mean by that is getting to the point where you're ready to start the development portion of your project, meaning that you've gone through, you've sold it to your organization, you've gotten approvals through your organization, you've selected your vendor, and you've started the process. Most organizations are struggling in the first half of this journey. Once you get to the starting line, and assuming you've selected the correct vendor and created a good relationship with that vendor, you'll find that things will actually flow much smoother from that point going forward. So getting to that starting line is very, very challenging for some organizations. Some of the things that I would recommend along those lines, you're going to hit any number of pitfalls, delays, false starts. Seek assistance and education in order to define a successful strategy. So all the things that I put up in the polling question, if you go back and you seek that assistance, whether it's through other clients or consulting firms like Ascendian, I would recommend highly that you do that. Quite honestly, and I've mentioned this to Eric and his team before, I'm not sure that we were educated enough to have selected Mach7 as our vendor prior to engaging with a consulting firm like Ascendian, who educated us and allowed us to become basically smart enough to make the correct selection. Second thing I want to mention is don't overwhelm your organization. Very quickly, these VNA projects become very large, and before you know it, everybody is scared, and they have a tendency to back away. So don't overwhelm your organization. Take small steps. Determine exactly what you want to accomplish, and do it piece by piece. Maybe you want to take over radiology and bring those particular image sets into your VNA. And then after that, potentially you want to bring in other ologies, cardiology, endoscopy, so forth. And then you decide where you want to go beyond that. Are you interested in getting to the UnPAC, holy grail, where you have options to consolidate and or eliminate PACS vendors? And so at this time, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Mary Lou for her portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Trent. This is Brian Appleby, Clinical Systems Manager at Wake Radiology, and Mary Lou Lovell, who's our Senior Systems Analyst. And anyway, so Wake Radiology, we have 14 private imaging centers. We support 3 area hospitals and many private practices like neuro and ortho and urgent care practices. Currently, we have one of those hospitals that we support is fully aggregated with us here, and we're running the GE RIS IC. And that hospital that we're integrated with, they send us via all of their DICOM and then their HL7 or ORM messaging to automatically create the orders in our RIS, and images come over and everything's matched up. We use our RIS, our PACS currently, to read in that facility. And once we generate the diagnostic report, it's sent from our RIS back to the owning organization and distributed from there. Mary Lou's going to talk with us about our trip through the pieces and parts of the VNA that led us to our purchase and how we got there. I think we were a little unconventional on how we did this, but I will let her take over and talk with us about that.
Good afternoon. So our journey with Mach7 actually started a few years ago when we brought them on site and we actually evaluated the Keystone engine. And we've identified some use cases that would solve problems that we had here with our own imaging. And so we actually purchased the workflow engine because it would solve some routing issues that we had with mammography. We actually aggregate all of our screening mammography to one site, and we read all of them in batch mode. And then the diagnostic mammos are read locally. And that posed the problem of being able to read those, or get all the diagnostic studies to one workstation that was on site, and then routing all the screenings to the one local site that was doing the batch reading. So we identified that the Keystone engine would allow us to route those images by the study description. And in that way, we were able to decrease our network traffic, because we were originally sending all those studies that were the screenings over the network twice. And with the implementation of the workflow engine, we could send one set of studies, and then when we got them into the LAN, we were able to send them to two workstations they needed to go to. When we added tomosynthesis last year, we added another workstation, and those tomosynthesis images had to go to the specific workstation. And so that just brought another area of where the Keystone engine was able to identify those images and send them where they needed to. The other thing that the Keystone engine was able to help us with was our prefetching. We were having to have our technologists send those prior exams all to the workstations, and of course they all had to go now 3 times. When we implemented the prefetching, it allowed us to send those images that were the priors during the night, which helped with the network traffic during the day. And then we were also able to free up our technologist time with not having to spend all day pushing those priors. One of the reasons that we began to go down to look at the VNA was now we are going to store the tomosynthesis images in a BTO format, and our current PACS only allowed the SCO. So we've now decided to go with the VNA, and we're implementing that. That should allow us to store now any type of study, whether it be DICOM or non-DICOM. We also needed, we wanted to aggregate data from outside entities to be able to read on a single platform. Our goal at Wake Radiology is to be able to provide our radiologists with one platform to read from a viewer, a single viewer. And we needed to normalize the data, which the Keystone engine would allow us to do. And so we've been able to start working towards that with the implementation of the VNA. It was very important to us to be able to store our data in a non-proprietary format. We are going to be going through a large migration, and we wanted to be able to do that migration once and not have to pay for it ever again. So we're hoping that that will solve our problem with a lot of imaging issues with image storage issues with SOP classes and proprietary format, and being able to store some scanned documents, and being able to position ourselves to transition from one PACS vendor to another and be able to be nimble and be able to, if we decide to go with best of breed for a viewer or a work list, we would be able to fit that in without having to go through a lot of rebuild and re-interfacing, and so we're still in the process at this point of the implementation of our VNA. I'm sure there will be things that we will be changing direction in and trying to determine what is going to best fit our needs. But we feel like that the Mach7 Keystone Engine and VNA are going to be able to make us successful in getting an aggregated platform. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Eric.
All right, thank you very much, Mary Lou. And although to all the participants, although I'm throwing up a thank you slide, please don't hang up yet. But I do want to take the time and thank you, Mary Lou, Brian, and Trent from both Wake Radiology, Centera. They're both, both customers, they're great customers and also partners, and I appreciate you taking the time to share your strategy and your process that you've gone through with Mach7 to where we are today. I think a big part of Mach7 is, it is a relationship with our customers, and the solutions we provide today, in big part are from listening to our customers and understanding their needs and continuing to evolve those solutions that we put out there. To all the participants, I would invite you to our booth at RSNA. We're in booth 6344. Also, too, please, if you get the time, go visit our website. We do have at mach7t.com/RSNA. We do have a page where you can actually sign up time to speak, face-to-face in person with Mary Lou and Brian and Trent, if you have more questions. So I'd encourage you to do that. As far as at Mach7, what we provide, actually what I would term that we provide is really an enterprise imaging platform. And as both at Centera and Wake Radiology, that is the platform that they have installed at both of their sites. That enterprise imaging platform are really defined in terms of what we all know. We all know what a PACS is. It's a picture archive communication system. We really focus that enterprise imaging platform around that A and C in PACS. The A being that vendor-neutral archive, and the C being that communication workflow engine. And I think that communication workflow engine is a key differentiator and a key component to anyone's enterprise imaging strategy. I think as we recall, as Mary Lou was explaining, actually that is where they first started before they went with the entire platform at Wake Radiology. It was really around the communication and the workflow. How do I, whether you're a large IDN that has 8 different PACS systems, as Trent explained, or you're a group of imaging centers and you're reading for a number of different facilities, how do you enable that communication and that interoperability across all these disparate PACS systems and sites? How do you make sure that, the one site, which calls it a CT head, can be brought in as CT brain, and accession numbers aren't going to collide, and MRNs, are unique and things like that. So at the core of what Mach7 provides is really that enterprise imaging platform. On top of that and around that, we build what I would term are different pillars of capabilities. So if I start at the bottom right there at specialty workflow, I would describe, our platform provides the ability to really enhance the clinical workflow for those front-end PACS, for those front-end visualization solutions. whether it be normalizing the metadata so that hanging protocols work better or easier to configure. It could be that the specialty workflow from the platform, maybe it's splitting thick slices from thin slices. Sending the thin slices to your advanced Viz 3D workstations and your 2D visualization solutions get only the thick slices. Maybe it's pulling out radiation dosage and sending it to your dose monitoring system. So the platform in itself, although it is an enterprise platform, can really also help enhance the clinical value within each of your departments. In the platform as well, moving on to that next little pillar, we talk a lot about best-of-breed visualization. So depending on your site, we believe your clinicians should be able to choose what visualization tools they want to plug into the platform. From an IT perspective, we've standardized, consolidated, stabilized the A and C and PACS, the archiving and communication. But let's enable the clinicians to pick what they see as their best-of-breed visualization tools that plug into the platform. And that could be a traditional PACS that your physicians prefer, or it could even be a lighter weight, cashless viewer that's plugging right into the platform. But we certainly spend a lot of time here at Mach7 working with a number of different vendors to ensure the integrations between our platform and different viewers, different visualization tools works smoothly and importantly too is very fast. The next pillar there is really around sharing and access. If you're an enterprise and we've now consolidated all this data across radiology and cardiology and dermatology and ophthalmology and pathology and so forth, now how do we make it accessible? So we do have tools for making it accessible from within your own EMR, whether you have a Epic or Cerner or Allscripts or whichever brand it may be. But even going beyond that and providing a physician portal and patient portal where referring physicians can get access to their patients and patients can log in and see their own records, and from there, be able to share it, and not necessarily share it through burning CDs, but let's share it over an email and a URL that is securely, provides the right security protocols and workflows to be able to log in and get access. The next capability there around our platform that we talk about is really from a health information exchange and HIE perspective. Our platform, I think, uniquely has XDS protocols built in. If you get our platform, and some of you may or may not know what XDS protocols are, but when you buy our platform today, for instance, we can store a DICOM study, we can store an HL7 results, and in 3-5 years, when your state HIE tries to query something out over XDS protocols, there's no need to have a second or separate environment, a separate set of servers that provide your XDS capabilities. The platform will automatically wrap the content of the data in XDS and enable it to your state HIE. So there's an investment there to let's have a platform that consolidates the data from my enterprise today, but also enables me to talk to those regional facilities and maybe even my state HIE that may be being set up depending on which state you're in to be able to exchange that data. And the last piece here we talk about off of the platform is really around content management. So certainly the platform is built to manage DICOM, and I think there's we're very deep in the abilities of which the platform can do around DICOM. But let's look beyond DICOM too. Let's look at the non-DICOM components, the TIFF image from ophthalmology, the JPEG image from dermatology and wound care, the AVI movie file from endoscopy, or the PDF document from radiology oncology. The platform provides natively capabilities to store all different formats in the platform, and by default, store them in their native format. I think a couple of things around non-DICOM is twofold. One, how you're going to store it. Well, by default, we store it in its pure non-DICOM format, but optionally can wrap it in DICOM and optionally can wrap it in XDS if there's the right business case and the right need in your organization. But secondly, the real important thing around content management too is how you acquire it. So as you're all out there evaluating platforms and VNAs and so forth, I would encourage you to learn and understand, if you're looking beyond radiology and cardiology, how the system can be used to really manage that content and acquire that content that's not in a DICOM format. So in summary, again, I'd encourage you all to stop by our booth at RSNA. Mary Lou, Brian, Trent will all be there. You can schedule time to speak with them on our website, mach7t.com/RSNA. And when you come there, we'll probably talk about these components as far as solutions. You know, we have a universal archive. It's a VNA, plus it's also an XDS repository. It's an XDS registry. We also have our universal communication workflow engine. This is the engine that manages DICOM routing and prefetching, but goes beyond that. It also handles workflows with HL7, XDS, web service calls, and things like that. Our universal clinical viewer is a zero-footprint universal clinical viewer. It's designed to image enable your EMRs, your portals out there. And we also have our own physician and patient portal. Has a lot of great workflows around access, and not only access, but how you can share the data. And lastly, we're looking forward to introducing a new universal work list at RSNA this year, where it can be used to really drive those different best-of-breed diagnostic viewers for you. So with that, I would like to thank all the participants and hand it over to Bernie. I think we have had some great questions submitted, which I think Bernie's going to facilitate and orchestrate us through the question and answer phase. And two, if you have questions and you have not submitted them yet, I encourage you to use your question and answer submission to file those through. So with that, Bernie, I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks so much, all of you, for that great presentation. We do have time for a few questions, so we'll get started. And here's one directed specifically to Trent, but it could be everyone should feel free to chime in. Trent, you talked about the vendor being nimble and agile. How often during your implementation phase have you had to change direction?
That's a great question. Actually, quite a few times. And I would say that the reason for that has to do with the fact that you are integrating with so many other systems, whether they're individual PACS systems, which may have their own set of hurdles that you're going to need to surpass, and certainly your EMR. But there are times, and for us specifically, we were looking to go with one of our larger radiology PACS vendors, and we ran into an issue, a synchronization issue between that particular PACS system and the Mach7 VNA. Now, the issue is on the PACS side, but nonetheless, we still had a hurdle that we needed to overcome, and we needed to pursue that with the PACS vendor. So we switched gears, and in the interim, we went with a cardiology solution. So it was very nice to see that the Mach7 was able to kind of traverse our internal craziness, if you will, as we move through the implementation phase of the project.
Great. Does anyone else have anything to add to this, or should we go on? Okay.
I think that was great, Trent.
Okay. What type of interfaces do you expect between the VNA platform and an EMR?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that. I think that's a great question. I think there's certainly two directions of interfaces between an EMR and a VNA, an enterprise imaging platform. I think both internally, certainly the VNA and the platform is going to be interested in those patient updates and patient merges and even order updates. So as those patient updates come in, let's make sure we not only update the database, but let's go and make sure that the data stored on your storage devices can also be updated, either on the device immediately or even on recall later. But I think that is one shortcoming of some other systems out there, is that, and we found as we do migrations today, that as patient updates and merges occur, they're not actually being done on the storage itself. So inbound, I think those are important. Also, too, even listening to HL7 orders coming in from, depending if your EMR is also managing, for instance, the RIS and CVIS functions, those kind of messages can be used to trigger prefetching type workflows. But even outbound too, I think outbound from the VNA, from the platform, often we'll use result messages into the EMR to trigger those interfaces to image enable your EMR, so sending over those URL links and so forth up to the EMR. So.
Thanks for that. Does Mach7 have an alliance with the Universal zero footprint viewer?
Yep, good question. So Mach7 does have our own universal zero footprint viewer, but we also work with many other vendors on with their viewers, both whether it be an enterprise viewer or a diagnostic viewer, and we do see ourselves as neutral in that aspect. We are neutral from a storage perspective, although Trent may argue with me here in my use of the word neutral. But we are neutral from both a storage aspect as well as a viewer aspect. We have many customers that have integrated with many other viewers outside of our own, and our plan is to keep that neutral.
Here's a great question, I think. How can anyone who's gone through an Epic implementation state that a VNA project could be overwhelming? How do the two compare?
Trent, you've got to take that one.
And it could be any EHR implementation, I think. Is Trent there?
Trent, I don't know if you're on mute, but I think you're the perfect one to answer that.
Okay, yeah, I'll take that. I was just formulating an answer here. It is a good question. I think what we're seeing, I was involved in both our Epic EMR implementation as well as our VNA implementation, and to compare and contrast the two, without question, your EHR is going to be much more overwhelming to the entire organization. But generally speaking, at least the way we did it here at Centera, we had literally hundreds of people involved in that type of an implementation over a period of 7 years to bring all of our organizations up on that EMR. Whereas on the VNA side, we're really dealing with just a couple teams, so a couple handfuls of people that are looking to really redesign the entire strategy of how we do imaging. And it goes beyond radiology. So we're looking to take it to all of the ologies in the organization. So from that standpoint, where it gets a little bit more overwhelming even than in an Epic EMR, is due to the fact that you have such a smaller team, and you're really looking to take this beyond the normal PACS/radiology environment that you're dealing with today.
Mm-hmm. It's all relative. So this is a question about IOM, which I guess is Lifecycle management of information over the life cycle. How does PACS know when data is deleted through ILM in the VNA?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll take that. So yeah, imaging lifecycle management, I think that's as Trent highlighted, that can be an important part of anyone's business case. And I would say the ultimate solution to that is really the protocols, the standards defined by IHE around IOCM. So, for all of you out there, I would encourage your vendors to implement the IOCM image object change management protocols, although be it that is a relatively new standard released by IHE, so it's going to take some adoption to get that out there. But that ultimately, I think, is the longer-term solution to this. But in the interim, I think there's a few different ways. One, certainly there are different PACS vendors on the market today which have interfaces that we can communicate with them. For instance, over HL7, it's a standard communication, but the content of it may be a little more private. So, we may use an order message with a tag of delete in it, for a particular, accession number and study instance UID and things like that. So there are some vendors that have interfaces like that we can work with. Second, too, or thirdly, it's also, when you start talking about ILM, I would also look at your longer-term strategy of how you see your PACS and your VNA, working together. When we talk ILM, certainly I think most institutions aren't going to be deleting anything for at least 7 years. And obviously if it's mammography or pediatric case, it could be longer than that. And with many sites that we have, we're implementing ourselves as a deep archive for those PACS systems. So often the PACS doesn't control or maintain that data that's been sent off to the deep archive, after maybe a couple of years, or it could even be less than that. So depending on how that architecture works and so forth, it may become a non-issue as to if the PACS knows that you deleted something that's 12 years old or not. But with that too, I think it's also, kind of as a catch-all case, there are things that we can do to synchronize, even do direct database updates, call store procedures, and things like that to make sure things stay in sync. But again, I would encourage, if you have vendors you're working with now, ask them when they see IOCM coming on their roadmap.
Okay, thank you. What options are you seeing and recommending for viewers integrating into this VNA?
You know what? I think I can take that one too.
Did you hear it all right?
Yes, I heard it fine. So as far as options, I also think that's a good question. If you are, implementing this enterprise imaging strategy across your enterprise, and you're consolidating the data across all your specialties, now how do you plug in the viewers? And I think there's different levels of viewer integrations that can be done. Many of the, I would say, for lack of a better term, many of the more traditional PACS systems, obviously they can do a DICOM query retrieve kind of interface, and in that case, the pull from those more traditional systems, is probably not going to meet your performance requirements for what and how fast you need images in those viewers. So if your front-end PACS only has capabilities of doing a traditional asynchronous, DICOM query retrieve, then I would recommend that, with your VNA, that you have the proper routing and prefetching, algorithm set up. And in addition to that, you're going to need to have a level of cache, underneath that traditional system, that holds enough data so that data can be as close to real time as possible for the physicians. Kind of, I'd say the next tier up as far as optimized integration with the VNA, a lot of viewers out there are becoming more and more intelligent about how they communicate over standards. So, for instance, even a DICOM compliant viewer that can do synchronous query retrieves, can essentially stream images one at a time, but in an intelligent way, such that from an end user perspective, you can see that first image in less than 2 seconds. And going beyond that, those DICOM synchronous query retrieves, also have an abilities in leveraging standards such as WADO and MINT and WADO-RS. Those can be standard-based approaches that can really give you a much better response times on the viewer and on the front end. And in those cases, the cache that you need for those front-end viewer solutions doesn't have to be as big. You can keep it more streamlined. And then thirdly, there's many viewers out there. I think more and more we're starting to see in the market that they can really go cashless on top of your VNA. And so truly in that decomposition of a PACS, you can buy just a visualization tool that has optimized either over a standards protocol or even doing direct storage mapping. Can get direct access to the data that is managed by the VNA. And so literally be able to have a full-fledged thin client to zero footprint diagnostic viewer that does both 2D, 3D, MIP, MPR without having a single cache or storage on their servers. So I think we're starting to see more and more of those hit the market.
Okay. So do you think that an organization such as Centera can completely move to a deconstructed PACS after implementing a VNA platform? Has someone done that before?
So I guess I'll take that question. I think from a deconstructed PACS is certainly a newer trend in our market. I think we're starting to see more and more institutions think about it. We do have a couple of sites actually overseas that have implemented such environments, so not in the United States, but it is certainly a strategy that I think a lot of institutions are considering. But I think the important piece is to take it in phases. Let's make sure we first get that platform in place, a platform that can properly standardize the archiving and communication across an enterprise, and then from there, let's take the next step of evaluating the different visualization tools and viewers, how they plug in, and per the comment I just had on viewers, what viewer options are out there, and do those viewer options fit in with what your clinicians need. Again, at the end of the day, we're all here to diagnose a patient, and let's make sure those physicians, those specialists and subspecialists, have the tools they need to properly do that clinical diagnosis to the best of their ability.
And as a client, a customer like Centera, we're very much in line with that in exactly the way Eric just laid it out. What it does is it gives you the options. So maybe you have an AIC that exists out there as a multi-hospital IDN, and they have their own PACS system. Well, you can eliminate that, basically unpack that as part of your VNA strategy. And then you can start to look at maybe smaller organizations, smaller hospitals, and do the same thing. So you can go through a consolidation type of a step, and then you can ultimately decide if you want to take the larger step of actually eliminating that particular portion and unpacking it and bringing in more of a work list engine solution across your enterprise. But it definitely gives you any number of options to decide what's going to be best for your organization.
Okay. I'm going to ask one last question, and then we'll move on to polling. Mary Lou, this is for Mary Lou or Brian. What is Wake Radiology's plan for business continuance with the VNA?
This is Brian, and I'll take that question, and thanks for the question. So currently, what we didn't mention before is we're currently in the process of replacing our PACS, and we're in the vendor selection process of that. So in today's world, we don't have a business continuance solution in place, and we know that we need one moving forward. So we're working actively with Mach7 and trying to determine how we're going to do that, whether it's coupled with our backup data center or however we're going to handle that. We just know that now that we're in a 24/7 world that we have to support and be able to do all of take our systems offline, do all of our updates, upgrades, and everything like that, and continue the business. But today we don't have that. We have to go to our backup plans for teleradiology, which is the one big thing that we support 24/7. So that's just in our plans. We know that we're moving forward with that, and we're looking forward to continuing our work with Mach7 to make that happen.
Perfect. Hey, so Brian and everybody else, Bernie, I think we're almost out of time, but what I'd like to do for the audience is one last polling question, and then I'm going to let you all have the rest of your time. But I'd like to end this and just ask, from all that we've talked about today and really an enterprise imaging strategy, where, I'm curious as to what components everyone is in their imaging strategy. Do you have a VNA? Or maybe you have an earlier generation VNA that, maybe you're interested in enhancing a bit. Do you have a communication engine? Do you have an engine that's handling your DICOM, HL7, your interfacing and so forth? What about a clinical viewer? Do you have an enterprise viewer? And lastly here, what about a portal? Do you have a portal that is image-enabled that you're working with? So I'll give everyone a chance just to answer some of those questions, and then we'll close out the conversation.
Okay, and while you're answering, I just want to say that if you want to view the archive of this webinar or share it with a colleague, you can visit the on-demand webinar section on healthcareitnews.com. And thanks for coming.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, there are still responses coming in, although I will move to the last slide here so you can see some of the results. But again, as Bernie highlighted, thank you to all the participants. Thank you again to Brian and Mary Lou and Trent. And again, please, feel free to stop by our booth. Even go to our website, mach7t.com/RSNA. We'd love to see you, and you can also sign up for some time to meet face-to-face with our customers, Trent, Mary Lou, and Brian. So thank you again.